Friends, I'm sure the topic which is at hand, review of related literature, all of us are familiar with this topic, whether we publish a paper, we take up our MTech or ME dissertation, or we take up MBA dissertation, or we have done doctoral research, and we all know that this particular aspect is very crucial in the report which is prepared at the end of any research work which is carried out. So, friends, welcome to the session. I'm going to be very brief. And then we have already, Dr. Sunil has sent 12 papers to the coordinators. And hopefully the coordinators have got copy of those 12 papers, because towards the end of the session, maybe 45 to 1 hour will be devoting to the task, and the presentations will be made by the participants tomorrow. So when we say review of related literature, a number of questions need to be answered. The very first question is, what is review of related literature? Second is, why is it essential to carry out the review of related literature? So what functions, what purposes review of related literature serve for the researcher? Then the third question which we'll try to answer through interaction is, what are the various sources which can be tapped or accessed to find the relevant literature for a given study? And then, is there any problem with the existing method of reviewing the literature? And what should be done? And what is the systematic process of carrying out review of related literature? So coming to the very first aspect, that is, what is relevant review of literature? You can read through that it is systematic. That means when you say it is systematic, that means it's a planned process, and there are steps involved in carrying out review of related literature. It is explicit. It clearly specifies what has already been done, and reproducible. That means whatever has been done is being reproduced. It's a method for identifying. The very first thing you can see here is identifying. So what is being identified in a review of related literature? You identify the sources of information. You identify the relevant work which has been carried out related to the study at hand. For example, in the last session, I was listening to your presentations. Inderpreet, she has taken up design of hybrid reinforced concrete. Now, once this topic has been taken up, so all that work which has been carried out on reinforced concrete, maybe hybrid or not, though that studies can be identified and can be included in the review of related literature. Somebody took a study, I think, a group of institution, on stress and performance of students. And the person has taken up the objectives, whether stress is related to the performance of student or stress is related to the gender of the student. So all those studies which are related to stress and performance and stress and gender, they will be included in the review of related literature. So identifying primarily refer to locating the sources of information and identifying the studies which relate to the topic at hand. The second part you see, evaluating. It doesn't only involve location, but evaluating the studies which have been identified. Evaluating here means, is the study having the variables which you have taken up? Is the study carried out in the context which is relevant to you? Is the study taken on a sample which is going to be your sample for the study? Is the study having the same variable which you have selected for research, or is the study use the measuring tools which are valid and reliable, and the findings are journalizable? So evaluation means you are trying to determine the relevance, the appropriateness, the worth of the study which you have identified. And synthesizing, this is very important component when we say review of related literature. Normally, when you see the review of related literature in any dissertation, any thesis, you will come across that it is presented in a chronological order. That does not involve any kind of synthesis, but synthesis means the various studies which have been identified, evaluated, abstracted. Now you collate the information from the various sources and then organize that information and include it in a journal article or dissertation or the thesis which you are writing. So, synthesis simply does not mean collecting the information, preparing an abstract, and including it in the review of related literature. I'll go into more details when we go to the existing system and what should be done. And identifying, evaluating, and synthesizing the body of completed and recorded work produced by researcher, academicians, and practitioners. So whatever sources you try to tap and whatever studies you find relevant in those sources, they are abstracted and then organized or synthesized. That is what is referred to as review of related literature. So think of three important terms: identification, evaluation, and synthesis. And the literature review thus is systematic, explicit, and reproducible. This is what you need to. Now, the purposes which are served by review, the very first thing you can see is if you have to select a problem, even then you go in for review of related literature. Broadly, you are thinking you are going to work in the area of stress management or stress and performance, but then you are going to zero down the variables after you go through the literature, and then you give what are the gaps in the current literature and how that gap can be filled in by taking an additional study. So your statement of the or selection of the problem comes from the review of related literature. And then once you identify the variables which you are going to include, because ma'am has taken up stress and performance, stress and gender and performance. So the literature is available which says the stress level varies between boys and girls or among boys and girls, or there are differences in the stress level of boys and girls. And then if you come across that there is difference, then only gender needs to be included in the study. Or somebody talked about the hybrid reinforced concrete, then there are different ways of reinforcing the concrete. So what the research says, which particular technique of reinforcement has been proved to be more useful, can those two techniques which independently reinforce the concrete can be joined together and a hybrid reinforced concrete can be used. So the very first basic purpose which review of related literature is going to serve as help the researcher in selecting the problem, identifying the variables which need to be included in the study, and state the objectives of the study. And second, you see, is very much related to the very first one, that is building the rationale for the work. So once you have stated the problem, the justification for the study comes from the review. If large body of research exists and the results are conclusive, there is no need to repeat the study. But if a large body of research exists, but the results are inconclusive, it leaves a scope for taking up a further study. Or you find that one particular variable has been studied in a few studies, but that shows a significant relationship with your another variable. So that also leaves a scope for taking up that area or including that area in your study. So justification of the study can be built on the basis of the previous work which has been carried out, and that will provide you the gaps. And many studies, when they are written, the future scope for research is also included. Even that future research which can be undertaken in the area provides you basis for taking up the study, research study. Then I was listening to the presentations. All of you have formulated the hypothesis. But I was wondering how many of you actually have gone in for review of related literature and tried to make the hypothesis. It was all hypothetical. So it was that you were trying to make null hypothesis or you were trying to make the alternate hypothesis. Now, this is essential function of review of related literature, because once a researcher carries out review of related literature, if the findings are conclusive and all the studies which you have taken up, they clearly say there is no significant relationship between stress and the performance of students in civil engineering, maybe the hypothesis which you formulate will be the null hypothesis. There is no significant relationship between stress and the performance of students in civil engineering. But on the other hand, if all the studies they come out with there is significant relationship between stress and performance of students in civil engineering, then you are not going to make null hypothesis, then you are going to make a directional hypothesis that there is significant positive correlation. If all the studies say positive, you are going to make it. Or if all the studies say there is significant negative correlation between the stress and the performance of the learner, then that directional hypothesis need to be formulated. Many of the researchers which we come across, even in the first chapter, the person is giving the hypothesis. But hypotheses normally are driven from the review of related literature, which is presented in the second chapter of your dissertation or the master's level, or it is a PhD dissertation. Then it helps the researcher in selecting appropriate design for research. Now here, the question comes, even if you're thinking of a descriptive study, whether you are going to take up the case study or survey study, a decision has to be made. Maybe you have only one institution excelling in industry institute interactions. In that case, a survey is not the right design, but a case study is the right design for taking up research. So the previous studies which have been carried out, if they clearly point out that industry institute interaction leads to better placement of students, then maybe there is one institution which has established industry institute interactions which are of excellent quality. That institution becomes a case study for you to find out how they have established industry institute interaction and how industry institute interaction has helped them to ensure 100% placement of their students in the world of work. So, or if you have studies which have established relationship between two or more than two variables, and you find that there is significant positive correlation between the two variables. Now, when I say intelligence and achievement, normally the literature would say higher the intelligence, higher is the achievement. Now, in this kind of a study, I cannot actually go in for experimentation because intelligence I cannot manipulate. This is a variable which it is an individual characteristic. But yes, when I am taking up a study which says that I'm going to study the effect of computer assisted instruction on the performance of student in physics, then I may include a variable of intelligence in the study. So design would be where intelligence can be taken up as a classifying variable, where you can categorize your students on the basis of the ability, high, average, and low. And the design would be where you are going to select stratified sample from for this study, where all the three levels of intelligence are represented, and you are going to manipulate the variable of instructional strategy. That is, you are going to use a CAI package and you're going to use the traditional method of instruction and see its effect on the achievement. So it is very important that once you are taking up a study, there is need to take up the right or the appropriate design for research. So whether the research design you are going to use is going to be descriptive, under descriptive, whether it's going to be survey, case study, or content analysis, or whether when you're going for correlational research, are you going to have the relationship study or you're going to have the prediction studies, that is on the basis of joint entrance examination, you are going to predict the performance of the learner after 4 years in electrical engineering or civil or mechanical engineering. So that is going to be the focus. Or if it is going to be experimental study, are you going to take up one short group design, or you are going to make use of pre-test, post-test, control group design? These are the questions which can be answered on the basis of the previous work which has been carried out in the literature, which is already published. Another very important purpose which is served as review of related literature helps you in selecting the tools for collecting the data. Now, when you go through the studies, you come across what have been the measuring tools. Was it a questionnaire? Was it an interview schedule? Was it an observation schedule? Or as in engineering, you have different, if you are going to measure the current, what is going to be the measuring tool? If you are going to measure the resistance, how you are going to measure the resistance? If you are going to measure the pressure, how it is going to be measured? Or if you are going to measure the shear strength or tensile strength, then what parameters need to be measured, and then you are going to calculate the shear strength and the tensile strength. So what are those parameters which you have included, how they are going to be quantified in a particular study? That needs to be, and the previous literature provides you a glimpse at the tools which can be used to measure the variable which you have included in the study. Then sample. It's a very no study, research study can be carried out on the population itself. It's a very expensive proposition. For every research, you need to take a sample. So when you look at the studies which have been carried out, majority of the studies related to educational technology pedagogy prior to 2010, even if you look at, had been in the area of general education. Very few studies in the area of technical education were available. So, whether the research which has been carried out, what was the sample selected for the study? So, you have to see whether the sample was adequate to generalize the findings of the study, whether the sample was from the general education or the technical education, whether when you talk about the research in engineering, whether 3 observations were made, 5 observations were made, 10 observations were made, or the variable was varied 3 times or 5 times or 10 times. The greater the number, the greater is the generalizability of the finding, and you can depend upon the findings of the study. So, selecting a sample is also where you get to know the previous studies, how much sample has been taken, what kind of technique of sampling has been used, and in what context the sample has been selected, what was the total population, and whether the person has taken 10%, 20%, 30% of the sample. So whether the findings are generalizable or not, that is the question you need to answer. So keeping in view the limitations of the previous research, you can adopt or use a modified technique of selecting a sample where there's greater generalizability of the findings of your study. Then comes the analysis. So, which particular technique of analysis has been used in satisfying the objectives or accepting or rejecting the hypothesis for the study? So each one of us is familiar with that statistical techniques primarily consist of descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. So once you have formulated the hypothesis, that means you are going for inferential statistics. So you need to find out which particular statistics has been used in previous studies, and the hypothesis you formulate, whether that can be verified by using the similar technique or some other technique is required. Maybe once you come across that a particular phenomena is affected by number of variables and number of variables are related to that, now the question is, are you going to use multiple regression equations, multiple correlations, or are you going to use the partial correlation to arrive at the effect of one variable on the other? So these are the questions which you can answer by having analysis of the techniques used by the previous researcher. So it can help you in crystallizing the techniques for analyzing the data. Then, when it comes to interpretation of the findings, many of us, though, include review of related literature, but when it comes to the interpretation of results, we completely forget about the findings of the previous studies. The findings of your study may be in agreement with the previous studies, they may be in disagreement with the previous studies, or so the study findings of the previous work can lend support to the findings of your study if they are in agreement. If they are in disagreement, then you need to give reasons why different findings have been observed in the study. So even the interpretation of your results has relationship with the studies which you include in the review of related literature, and you can thus justify the findings of your study. So these are the major purposes So you can see not even a single aspect of research is left. All aspects of research are related to the previous studies which have been carried out in the field. So Rand Corporation has given that any high quality research should demonstrate relationship with the previous work. That is what is important, and it helps the researcher in at various stages of research. So I would simply say that these questions, I'm not going to repeat this. All these questions which you see on the slide, they can be answered with the review of related literature. So all aspects are covered. Now, let's see what are the various sources of information which can be tapped. So over to Jammu. Any response from the audience when you carry out review of related literature? What could be or what are some of the sources of information which a researcher tries to access and use? Is it Jammu? Only one, two candidates. Yes, then. Ji, can Hanji, can anybody reply? Ji, please go ahead.
Basically, I am not followed the question. Please, will you repeat?
The question is, what are some of the sources which can provide you the information related to the work which you are carrying out?
Sources.
Sources of information. जब आप जर्नल में आर्टिकल देते हो या अपनी प्रेजेंटेशन में रिव्यू करते हो ऑफ रिलेटेड लिटरेचर, फ्रॉम वेयर यू गेट रिलेटेड लिटरेचर?
Good afternoon, ma'am.
जी प्लीज गो अहेड.
Ma'am, we get different data from the journals, which are updated journals.
Okay.
From any the recent updated articles, Wikipedia. You can go to the Wikipedia also. You can go to the Science World, Science download the journal, latest one, as per the and updation as you want. 10 years back, 5 years back.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think we all understand that various sources of information exist and we try to access these sources of information, which may include the dictionaries, the thesaurus, the indexes, the journals, the abstracts, the research reports, and you have collective works, you have annotated bibliographies, you have references and bibliographies, you have books. All these are nothing but various sources of information, and they can be classified primarily into three categories. And these three categories are preliminary sources of information, primary sources of information, and secondary sources of information. Now, my question to audience is, how would you differentiate among the preliminary, primary, and secondary sources of information? क्या डिफरेंस है? प्राइमरी क्या होता है, सेकेंडरी क्या है, प्रिलिमिनरी क्या है? Anybody who would like to answer? कुछ आइडिया? No reply? Ma'am, would you like to? Hanji, please. हाँ, sure.
Primary main sources that
Articles. Secondary data, specific data that is collected.
No. Auntie, Anybody from the center would like to respond, or let me clarify? Please go ahead. कौन से सेंटर से बोल रहे हैं? जम्मू, आप कहना चाह रहे हैं? नहीं, रुक लो. Now listen to when we say preliminary. Say for example, I have taken a variable hybrid. Now I would like to clarify the meaning of hybrid. What do I understand by hybrid? So from where I get the meaning of the term hybrid? I get it from the dictionary. Then I would like to know, are there any synonyms which can be used for the term hybrid? Then I go to thesaurus and check the synonyms. And similarly, when we talk about intelligence, I would like to know how intelligence can be defined. The one thing is, I can simply go to the dictionary, see the meaning of intelligence. I can go to educational dictionary. I can see the meaning of intelligence. I can go to a thesaurus to find out whether intelligence has any synonym which can be used. Maybe a person is likely to use intellectual ability. So once the person says intellectual ability, is it the same which can be used for intelligence? So I try to find out. Or say for example, I have a book. Now I want to locate whether the book contains the term hybrid reinforced concrete. So I don't go page by page and try to find out hybrid reinforced concrete. I go to the subject index. I try to locate the term hybrid reinforced concrete, and then I locate the page and read that page. Or I try to go to an index of psychological abstracts. Now, here, all the psychological abstracts which have been published in the year that is available, I find out, is there any study which has been carried out on stress and performance of student? Then I find out in which journal the study is available. Or there is an annotated bibliography which is available, which provides me a brief about what was included in a study on stress and performance of student. I read it, I find it relevant to what I'm going to do, so I try to identify the source where that study is available. So all your dictionary, your thesaurus, your indexes, whether it is a subject index, whether it is a author index, or whether it is the primary preliminary annotated bibliography or bibliography, they are all become your preliminary sources of information. Then comes primary source of information. As the term indicates, primary source of information means it is reported by a researcher or a practitioner or an academician who has undertaken the research. So the report is prepared and presented by a person who has undertaken the study. So I'm the author of dissertation, which I carried out master's level. So dissertation becomes a primary source of information. Your PhD dissertation also becomes a primary source of information. You publish a journal article and you have carried out the research and you report the findings of your research, it becomes the primary source of information. And all research reports, thus written by the author or written by the researcher, they are referred to as primary sources of information. Then comes secondary sources of information. Now, when I am reporting the findings of my own study, I am also trying to cite the references of the previous work which has been carried out. Now, this reference Somebody reading my journal article will also get an idea what previous research has been carried out, and under references I'm giving the full source of information. This becomes a secondary source of information. So the person from the secondary source of information finds the primary source of information and goes to the article which has been referred by me and reported in my paper. That is a secondary source of information. So a researcher not only refers to primary, but he refers to primary and secondary sources of information, and the right sequence, how one should go about. Start with the preliminary source, go to a secondary source, then go to the primary source. Because you need to go into details of few selected studies, not all. So initially clarify the terms, identify the source of information by using the preliminary sources of information, then go to secondary sources of information, and whatever studies you find are more relevant to the work which you are going to carry out, then go to the details of that study. That means the sequence is preliminary, secondary, and primary sources of information. Now, the process. I said the question which we are going to answer is, what is the process that is going to be followed? Now, here you are looking at the very first step in review of related literature is identify the keywords to guide the search. Now, I found that one of your groups had taken up study the impact of e-learning on technical on education system. Now, this was a study which was taken up. Now, tell me, what are the keywords in this problem title? Study the impact of e-learning on education system. What are the key words involved in this study? Okay, e-learning is one. Education system. Any other? Any other from the groups? When you say, जी, जिन्होंने ये टाइटल दिया था वो भी बोल सकते हैं. What is the key term here? Impact. Because you have included impact of e-learning on education system. So 3 keywords come into your mind: impact, e-learning, and education system. Likewise, when I take up the other study which was taken up, perceptions and expectations of service quality in government hospitals. This was one of the problems. So here, perception is one, expectation is another, government hospitals is another key variable, and service quality is the fourth keyword which needs to be identified. In other words, when we are taking up study, then the terms which are used in the title, the variables which have been selected for the study, they become the keywords to begin the search for the study. And once you have identified the keywords, the next step is identify the sources of information. Nowadays, it has become much more easier to tap the sources of information, because digital sources of information are available to you. Now, when I say journals, large body of research is available in the form of digital journals. They are all online available. Today only I was referring to Sage Publications, and they have provided open access to the journals. I'll give you the details when I move to open sources. There are more than around 10,000 journals which can be accessed free of cost, which are online available, and you can go to article level and access the information. All universities, the globe over, they have their websites, and all information, the research which has been carried out in various branches of engineering and technology, in the area of management, in the area of pharmacy, whatever disciplines they are offering, that is available online. If not complete, at least abstract is available, and you can see what major researches have been carried out at various levels, whether the faculty has done it, whether the students have done it, and whether the sponsored research projects are being carried out at various levels. In India, I would say you have Shodh Ganga, which is available. All the theses which have been submitted in various universities in India, they are available at Shodh Ganga. And you refer to any university, you go to that university, just put civil engineering, you'll get all the research which has the thesis which have been submitted in the area of civil engineering at doctoral level. So that research is available. So you can access complete thesis on Shodh Ganga. That's one major source of information. And the time which was taken by us to carry out review of related literature earlier has now been reduced substantially. We used to spend almost 6 to 8 months to gather the relevant studies. We used to visit different libraries and physically access the journals, the encyclopedias, and so on. But now that facility is available. And I would see that majority of the researchers now take hardly 2 to 3 months to complete their review of related literature. It may take, that synthesis may take time, but accessing the information which is available has become much more easier. And here, when I say identifying sources of information, start your search from the search engine, and you can use and or not. So and जब आप यूज करते हो, नैरो कर लेते हो, और करते हो, ब्रॉड कर लेते हो, अगर आप नॉट करते हो तो फिर नैरो कर लेते हो, राइट? So and or not combination can be used to use the keywords, and then search, start from the search engines and then go into the primary source of information. Then abstracting the information found in the reference. This is the third major step. Now here, I would say it involves number of steps. You need to read the article carefully. And you are trying to use skimming, scanning, read to study. These are three skills which the researcher can use while reading the article. Once I say scan, now you are looking at the variable which is a part of your study. So you are looking for whether PFL exists in the body of the article, and you are looking for the formation of the word PFL. You are just scanning and trying to find out whether PFL appears in the body of work. This is scanning. Skimming is when you read an article and try to prepare an abstract of that, You are trying to find out, is it relevant to the work which I am carrying out? You are using a technique of skimming. Read to study means you are carefully going through the various parts of the published work and then prepare an abstract which is to be used for your review of related literature. So, abstracting the information, you must try to first zero down on what is it that you would like to include in abstract which you will prepare. Maybe as a researcher, I try to say first I would like to the objective of the study, followed by the methodology which has been followed, and then the major findings of the study, and then the future research which can be undertaken in this area. So I'm going by four major parts: the objectives, the design, the methodology which has been used, and major findings, and the future research which can be undertaken in that area. So all studies which I read, I'll try to prepare an abstract which includes all these four major components. So each one of the abstract will include all the four major parts. No part will be missed. Otherwise, to collate the information becomes a problem. Becomes a problem. So abstracting the information, and while you are abstracting the information, you need to also clearly record the bibliographic information. That means who are the authors, in which year they have carried out, and what was the title of the study, where this study has been published, whether in the journal, whether it has been in a book which has been, it contains a chapter and it's a part of that, or whether it is available in the handbook. So the where this has been published, and you, when you say the source of information, you have to include volume, you have to include the specific pages which are, which contain that information. So complete bibliographic reference needs to be recorded. Fine. Then comes, once you have gone through the literature, you have carried review of related literature from various sources, then come the synthesis of information. Analyzing, organizing, and reporting the literature. And it is very important and crucial step in review of related literature. As I said in the beginning, chronological review is no review. You need to collate the information which you have gathered from various sources of information. The easiest approach is to give year wise or author wise. किस author ने क्या कहा, फिर किसने क्या कहा, किसने क्या कहा. Beauty of review lies in how you try to support or put contrary arguments in the literature. एक author ने कहा, whether it is supported by the other author, whether the other author contradicts that and gives another view, that is what you are looking at. And I'll let you know how you analyze, how you organize and report the results when I come to what are the flaws in the existing system and how it should be done. So primarily, when we say the four stages include identifying the keywords, then identifying the sources of information, then abstracting the information by using the techniques of skimming, scanning, read to study, and then analyzing and organizing and reporting the results of the various studies or the conceptual papers which have been referred by the researcher. Now let's go to how the existing process of review of related literature is carried out, what are some of the drawbacks that exist, and some of the guidelines which should be taken into consideration while reporting the review of related literature. Now, the very first, which I have been focusing again and again, review of related literature, go to Shodh Ganga. Go to any university site, especially in India, majority of the dissertation, majority of the thesis, it is chronological review which is being presented. And I was also never told how to go about synthesizing the review. I also did research, I also did the same thing. But now when you read articles, that too international journals, major difference you come across is they never include review in chronological order. It is all based upon their own analysis and understanding that they try to collate the findings of the various studies. And here I give you how you can synthesize the studies. I have taken examples from education and management, but you can always see how you can do that. One is classify studies on the basis of the findings. For example, study dealing with emotional intelligence and job satisfaction. First thing, I can, relationship can be positive, relationship can be negative, relationship can be no relationship. Broadly तो यही तीन आपके पास रह जाते हैं. In positive, there may be studies which say there is positive significant correlation. There may be studies which say there is negative, significant negative correlation. There may be studies which say there is negative but not significant. And you can classify all the relevant literature which you have accessed into categories: positive, significant positive correlation, significant negative correlation, and then if there are studies which say no relationship, so 5 major categories you can form, include the literature under. If you have taken a study which deals with differences, now here I have taken up that students taught through different instructional methods. One group taught through lecture method, another taught through self-learning modules. Now here, one could be there is no significant difference in the achievement of students taught through lecture and self-learning modules. Or there are significant differences, studies which say there are significant differences in the achievement of students taught through lecture and self-learning module. So it is non-directional kind of difference. Then you should look into whether students through lecture method, they outperformed the students taught through self-learning modules, or students taught through self-learning modules outperformed the students taught through lecture method. And there are not significant differences in the two groups. Now, all this you try to come out with alternatives, and you can classify the relevant literature again into 5 different categories: studies which found significant difference, then in whose favor they found the differences, and then comes the studies which found the differences not significant, then differences, ये तो same ही है, no significant or not significant is one and the same thing. So you can classify your review of related literature into these categories. Now here, what will be the advantage to the researcher? Once you are going to draw the conclusions, it becomes much more easier. Otherwise, you need to look into the finding of each study and then come to the conclusion. Agar you can classify studies on the basis of the context. Context means India में हुई हैं studies, Australia, US बाहर हुई हैं. So you can club studies at the international level, studies in India. You can club that. Or the studies have been conducted in India only, whether it have been more studies in UP or more studies in Punjab, or you can classify if you're going to have the comparison. चलेगी? Okay. मैं नहीं दिखूंगी, कोई बात नहीं. हाँ जी. Then you can also think of the context, whether the study has been conducted at a school level, college level, or university level. So whether it is on the primary student, whether it is in the first year student, final year students, higher education level, masters, etc., etc. You can also classify the studies on the basis of the sample. वो में आगे आ रहा है, स्कूल है, कॉलेज है, यूनिवर्सिटी है, वोकेशनल है, टेक्निकल एजुकेशन है, etc. You can classify the studies on the basis of the treatment. Now here, all your treatment, so you can classify whether the reinforcement, तो कितने आप वेरी कर रहे हैं, हाइब्रिड reinforcement, उसकी क्वांटिटी वेरी कर रही है. So वो क्वांटिटी पे वेरिएशन पे आपके पास स्टडीज हो सकती हैं. और if you're trying to say you are taking a glass fiber reinforced concrete and you are taking fly ash reinforced concrete, so maybe you classify the studies into glass and fly ash reinforced concrete. Then within each classification, वो findings के basis पे आप studies को classify कर सकते हैं. The review of related literature becomes readable, becomes understandable, and you can draw conclusions from the review easily if you have classified the studies into some broad categories. Now, कहाँ गया? ये मैंने नहीं दिखना, ये ऊपर नीचे क्यों नहीं जा रहा भाई? कोई एरो तो थल्ले ही जा रहा है. ये उल्टा चल रहा है सारा ही. ये प्रॉब्लम आ रही है कुछ. एक मिनट देखो कहाँ है. यही नहीं है, ये कहाँ? हाँ आ गया, आ गया. हाथ ही कहीं चल रहा है. So you can see another is the major drawback which we come across when we read the review of related literature. There are gaps in review. One study which has been carried out. Abhi, one of the students presented the synopsis for his master's doctoral research, and that he was taking up on the accident prone areas and the civil engineering which lead to the accidents on the highways. One study was included the independence area, मतलब 47-48 की एक study थी. Then it jumped to 7. कोई रिसर्च हुई नहीं होगी उस एरिया में, बट ऐसा नहीं है. We omit or we miss very important studies, and one has to look into that there has to be continuity in the research which is presented. So उसके लिए जो process था कि आप की terms को identify कीजिए, synonyms देख लीजिए, और synonyms देखने के बाद 3 important Boolean operations वो आप लगा सकते हो, which is and, narrows a search. जब मैंने कहा इंटेलिजेंस एंड इंटेलेक्चुअल एबिलिटी, नैरो कर लिया, दोनों इंक्लूडेड है. और या मैं कहती हूं इमोशनल इंटेलिजेंस एंड स्ट्रेस, वही स्टडी आएंगी जिसमें दोनों वेरिएबल पढ़े गए हैं. जिसमें एक पढ़ा गया वो स्टडी वो नहीं दिखाएगा. और ब्रॉडन्स द सर्च. आपने कहा और, अब मैंने कहा इंटेलिजेंस और इंटेलेक्चुअल एबिलिटी. जिसमें इंटेलिजेंस रेफर किया वो भी स्टडीज आएंगी, जिसमें इंटेलेक्चुअल एबिलिटी दी है वो भी आएगी. नॉट नैरोज द सर्च. नॉट मीन्स वो स्टडी एक्सक्लूड कर देगा. अगर मेरा फोकस है, आई एम ओनली सेइंग मैकेनिकल एप्टीट्यूड, not other aptitude in general, so only mechanical aptitude will be included, right? So one should learn how to narrow or how to broaden the search from the various search engines or primary or secondary sources of information. So chances are that you will not miss a study where the same variable has been studied by a different name, or where both the variables which you have included have been taken together. So continuity के chances आपके रह जाएंगे. And here I would say आज आपके पास लगभग 9,412 journals. This is available. Directory of open access journal is available on web. You can see it. Refer to the journals which are relevant to your area. And 6,582 journals can be searched at the article. So you can have complete article read online. 128 countries of the world are subscribing to this. So you are getting journals from across the globe, and itne articles total aapko wahan pe available hai. So you can see vast resource of information is available. Try to tap these. Many of us actually do not know where the information is. So locating is very, very important. Then जो मैंने आपको पहले कहा था, always start with preliminary, go to primary, secondary, and then go to primary. Libraries, if they are accessible, approachable, फिजिकल जर्नल्स जो आपकी लाइब्रेरी में आ रहे हैं उनको मिस मत कीजिए, उनको भी देखिए. एंड देन गैप्स नहीं रहेंगे आपकी रिसर्च में. अनदर मेजर ड्रॉबैक इज इनकम्प्लीट इंफॉर्मेशन. और ये एक कॉमन फिनोमिना है विच वी कम अक्रॉस. बच्चा लिखता है स्टडी वाज टेकन विद एन एम, लिख दिया आगे पूरा, आगे लिख दिया द मेजर फाइंडिंग वाज दिस. उसके आगे पीछे कुछ नहीं है. क्या मेथोडोलॉजी थी वो लिखा नहीं, क्या सजेशन उसने क्या दिए, कोई लिमिटेशन ऑफ रिसर्च थी वो है ही नहीं. नाउ द एग्जामिनर जो देख रहा है, इवैल्यूएट कर रहा है, वो यही पूछ रहा है भाई इसमें मेथोडोलॉजी क्या यूज की थी जिसकी ये फाइंडिंग है. बिकॉज द पर्सन हैज नॉट रिकॉर्डेड, ही इज अनएबल टू आंसर दैट क्वेश्चन. So before you start carrying out the review of related literature, as I said, decide what exact information you would like to abstract. As I said earlier, objectives, hypothesis, design, sample tool, major finding and suggestions for further research. ये आपका normally this needs to be included. अगर आप कॉन्टेक्स्ट क्लियर करते हैं, स्पेशली फॉर एक्सपेरिमेंटल स्टडीज, another researcher can replicate your research. अदरवाइज एक्सपेरिमेंटल स्टडी का कॉन्टेक्स्ट अवेलेबल नहीं है तो बहुत मुश्किल होता है उस एक्सपेरिमेंटल स्टडी को रेप्लिकेट करना. तो बहुत बार हम देखते हैं कि जो बाहर रिसर्च हुई होती है, and we only have a glimpse of the abstract, and then we go to conducting the research, there is large variation in the results. वो large variation is because we do not know what variables were controlled, under what conditions that experiment was conducted. So unless and until you have the context details, you cannot replicate the study. And जब आप रिव्यू लिखते हो एक एक स्टडी का, सो सिमिलर पैटर्न, has to be followed for all the reviews. Collating the information would be much more easier. And many a times it happens कि researcher tries to use certain abbreviations, अपनी coin कर लेता है. अब जब वो collate करने बैठते हो, याद ही नहीं आता कि इस abbreviation का क्या full form था. And then you need to exclude that study. Don't do it. If you are sure, then only you use the abbreviation, and standard abbreviations are to be followed rather than coining your own abbreviations while you are abstracting the information. Okay? And many a times you would like to have the direct quotes from the published work, usko inverted commas में, and acknowledge the source which has been given in the reference. That is very, very important. अब जब आप abstract करते हो information ना, हर तरह से it has to be complete. That means अगर मैंने 4 या 5 एरिया अपने लिए रखे थे, objective, design and methodology, design or methodology, and then major findings and suggestions for further research, हर चीज में मैं वो सब कुछ लिखूंगी, वो कंप्लीट होनी चाहिए, कुछ भी आधा नहीं लिखूंगी. करेक्ट. मेक श्योर when you try to jot down the things in your own words, वो करेक्ट रहे. एक्यूरेसी should not be lost. जो इंटेंशन ऑफ द रिसर्चर थी ना, those should be reflected in your writing. Clarity. So completeness will ensure clarity also. And coherent means logically they build on one study, build on another, so they should not be done separately. वो link आपको establish करना है from one argument to another, from one study to another, and so on. And concise. कहते हैं बच्चे क्या करते हैं, पूरा एक पेज भर देते एक स्टडी से. No, it has to be one paragraph if it is an abstract which you are preparing. But when you are collating, वो एक पैरा में बहुत सारी studies आ जाती है. So do that. That brevity has to be preferred over just getting the material from the source and including it in your review of related literature. Then ये भी एक हमारी, कई बार हम सोचे, बिफोर आई स्विच ओवर टू, मे बी आगे आ रहा होगा, हम ये सोचते हैं कि जितना ज्यादा रिव्यू कर लेंगे उतना ज्यादा अच्छा है. नहीं, जरूरी नहीं है. अगर द रिसर्च विच यू आर टेकिंग अप हैज बीन रिसर्च्ड, बहुत ज्यादा उस पर रिसर्च हुई है पिछले 10 सालों में, delimit your review of related literature to 10 years and report only results for 10 years. और अगर आपके सब्जेक्ट में इतनी ज्यादा चेंज आती है, जैसे कंप्यूटर साइंस है, so now you are talking of big data analytics, you are talking of cloud computing, you are talking of learning analytics, you are talking of artificial intelligence, जो कि बहुत पुराना कॉन्सेप्ट है, लेकिन रिसर्च अब जाके उस पर काफी हो रही है. मशीन लर्निंग है विच इज न्यू एरिया. सो कैन वी कि पिछले 10 सालों में 15 सालों में इस एरिया में ज्यादा रिसर्च हुई है, सो आई रिस्ट्रिक्टेड टू द 15 years वेयर देयर हैज बीन मोर रिसर्च इन दिस एरिया. तो जब हम 40 साल इंक्लूड कर लेते हैं, तो एक स्टडी 40 साल पहले की, फिर 1 साल 10 साल, मतलब 30 साल पुरानी हो गई, एक उसका कोई लिंक नहीं रहता. द सब्जेक्ट ऑल्सो चेंजेस, द कॉनोटेशंस ऑल्सो चेंज. सो थिंक ऑफ कि आपका जो द टॉपिक ऑफ रिसर्च इज एमिनेबल टू चेंजेस विच आर वेरी रैपिड, तो उसको लीजिए. राइट नाउ से फॉर एग्जाम्पल somebody वर्किंग ऑन MOOCs, तो 2011-12 में ये ज्यादा फैला और उसके बाद इस पे काफी काम हो रहा है. सो यू नीड टू रिस्ट्रेन फॉर द लास्ट 10 years. बहुत है. लास्ट 10 years क्या, 11 से लिया तो अभी तक तो सिर्फ 7 साल ही हुए हैं, नॉट इवन 11 साल. So 7 years work on research in the area of MOOCs can be part of your thesis. So think of where you want to delimit the study. Or maybe I only take up कि मैंने स्ट्रेस एंड परफॉर्मेंस को ही स्टडी करना है, मैंने परफॉर्मेंस एंड अदर वेरिएबल्स नहीं लेने हैं. हम लोग क्या करते हैं, ऑल इररेलेवेंट स्टडीज आल्सो बिकम अ पार्ट ऑफ माय रिव्यू, उसको एक्सक्लूड कर दीजिए. ओनली स्टडीज विच स्टडी परफॉर्मेंस एंड स्ट्रेस इन अ टेक्निकल इंस्टीट्यूशन, मैं उसी को ले रही हूं. सो मैंने डिलिमिट कर दिया टेक्निकल इंस्टीट्यूशन. सो डिलिमिट योर स्टडीज. एक ये भी आपको कभी कभी मिलेगा कि अभी मैं ना डॉक्टर सुनील ने आपको पेपर भेजे हैं 12, मैं उनको पढ़ रही थी एंड मेनी ऑफ देम प्रेजेंट में बात करते हैं, वर्क तो हो चुका,